Dr. Michael Wright is a Yuat Noongar man who throughout his career has worked to develop services which are culturally appropriate for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Michael holds an early career research fellowship with the Faculty of Health Sciences at Curtin University and is an Honorary Research Fellow with the Telethon Kids Institute. Here he talks about his career journey and his hopes for the future.
My family are Yuat, which is just, I'm Noongar, and Yuat is the area around Moora, Magamba, that region, so that's my grandmother's country. And I myself have lived always around Perth, so didn't grow up on country as such, but lived always in the Fremantle area. Mostly grew up there and went to school there. I came here to Curtin in the mid-80s, late 80s, and I did the bridging course here at the Centre for Aboriginal Studies. And I remember speaking to the person who was heading up that course at the time, and he said, if I were you, rather than doing this course, it'd be more worthwhile and beneficial if you were to do social work. It provided options around doing work like as a community development worker, for example, or counselling if you chose to, or working in the area of policy if that was something you were interested in also. From the time I started studies to when I finished my undergraduate degree was over probably a period of 6-7 years. So, in and out, taking a break and doing something else for a period of time. I think the main barrier or the main difficulty to overcome was there was no one in my family that had done it before, so I was the first to do everything. And so there was no family example that I could go and turn to or speak to or whatever. And I relied quite a lot on the cohort of others, Aboriginal people who were studying similar at the time, and they became a source of support and occasions inspiration. I had a friend who was doing social work, and I used to be inspired by how she was able to do everything, like be a sole parent, raise a family, and then still find time to study and do what she was doing.
Michael's first job as a social worker was at Royal Perth Hospital.
It was an interesting job, on a number of levels, but challenging as you'd expect it to be. And the role was quite expansive in that, unlike other social workers at the hospital where they were attached to a particular ward perhaps or a medical team or whatever similar, I could go anywhere within the hospital. I found as a first job it being quite difficult. But I'm sure it's true for anyone that's a new grad. Going into a new workplace is really hard. But there were some great moments there. I learned and enjoyed the experience. I was working at Derby, Oregon, and I was employed, this is working in the area of mental health, and I was managing the mental health service there, which was called the Aboriginal Community Support Service. There were a couple of people working at Derby then doing the Masters of Applied Epidemiology. I applied for entry into this course, and much to my surprise, I was accepted. Doing that or being involved in actually undertaking the course, I saw myself on this incredible steep learning curve, and as a result of that, from a skill set point of view, in terms of my skills generally, they just exploded beyond any of my realisation at all. And I continue to use those skills today, and it was a real pivotal point in time in my career in doing the DMA. After completing my Masters, was invited to do a PhD, and that was, the Telethon Kids Institute connection, because they were pulling together a group of Aboriginal students who were keen to do a PhD. And so the Institute, in collaboration, in partnership with some people here at Curtin, put up a National Health Medical Research Council capacity building grant application, and it was successful, and there were 10 Aboriginal TIs on that grant. It allowed those of us as TIs to actually commence a PhD with us as a support to each other. So there was a cohort of 10, as I mentioned. My research question really was about how caregiving, in this instance, different for Aboriginal people as from non-Aboriginal people. The study explored with them their experiences of living with mental illness, both the family members either in that caring role or being a family member, as well as the person in the family who was living with the mental illness. Trying to capture at least anyway, or understand better what it was for them, what were these attributes that provided a better understanding around caring and what does caring look like. So two things that come from that work is that the kinship, the kin-based system that we have as Aboriginal people acts as a sort of, similar to this, what this other groups do. They provide the support. So if we think about the nuclear family sort of role in the non-Aboriginal community, there aren't a lot of places for family members to go to outside the nuclear family. If they can't get what they need in the nuclear family, then there's nowhere else for them to go. So it makes, it's logical, it makes sense that they'd set up these other groups. That's not the case for Aboriginal families. There's lots of, through this kin-based system arrangement, there are aunties and uncles and cousins that people go to and don't feel a need to go to these consumer networks and the carer networks that have been established, which I found and to understand that better, it's about understanding how culture provides this protective factor in regard to providing the care for family members. The care that's provided in that Aboriginal context is so different, and it looks different and it feels different even, I believe. I think the greatest thing the thing that was very obvious to me was how there's a higher level of acceptance of someone who is somewhat different because of their behaviour, perhaps because of their underlying mental illness. A greater acceptance of them, and this reluctance, or very rarely do people get pushed out of the family because they have a mental illness. The other part to that story of my research was how the system is so difficult for Aboriginal people, both in its lack of understanding about Aboriginal culture, and because of that lack of understanding, the lack of empathy on part, but also the lack of responding in the way they should, and which comes across that Aboriginal people feel that they've been discriminated against, and that discrimination for them, measuring on a continuum, feels like systems abandoned them, to feeling like, as often was told to me, they felt like they'd been re-traumatised by the experience of being in the system itself.
Michael's research led him to work with elders and the community to co-design an Indigenous framework for delivering mental health services.
The research on this occasion was to actually find ways that we can actually improve on the way the services work and engage with Aboriginal people. So for that, we engaged again the community, essentially to find out more specifically what was wrong with the system as they understood it then and now. And it was the community who directed us to this and provided the answer to us on that regard. Is the major issue the community saw for the service providers was that they knew very little about Aboriginal culture, and that, in their belief, was the main reason why the services just didn't know how to interact with Aboriginal people. And they felt that a way to rectify that would be to educate the services on what is Aboriginal culture, in particular what is Noongar culture. Again, the community said that the best way to do that would be to engage elders to work alongside of the senior management in the first instance, and then across the organisation eventually. We had 14 organisations. We put out expressions of interest to the general community, and this was to mental health and drug and alcohol service providers. We had a very low attrition rate. I think there was only 2 of those organisations that pulled out. So we had a very, very committed group, let's call it. Very committed, but also very enthusiastic and very engaged. And to their credit, the service providers have actually performed remarkably and have been amazing in their overall enthusiasm for the work, and have really, importantly, have taken on both the advice the elders have given them, but actually implemented that advice whenever they've had to. So it's been fantastic.
We asked Michael, What are his hopes for integrating his research findings into services?
If you'd asked me the question, say, 3 or 4 years ago, I probably would have had this long list of... I still have a long list, it's true. But there's been so much shift. There's been incredible shift already in what services have done. Just to give you as an example, one of the services that is enrolled and has been working with us on this project, when they became involved and agreed to participate on the project with us, they had no Aboriginal clients, no Aboriginal staff, pretty much no Aboriginal anything. And so they went on this journey with us, and we engaged elders to work alongside their senior management, and they helped in a whole range of ways, looking at policies they already had in place, looked at how the process that they should embark upon to get more Aboriginal staff and whatever led from that. So essentially, oftentimes organisations want to do more but really don't know where to start. But having the elders sit with them, have conversation, share meals together, a whole range of things, instills confidence in the senior management to be able to go out and do stuff that they wouldn't have done if they didn't have that kind of support with them. So now, 5 years later, this organisation now has nearly 20% of their staff are Aboriginal, nearly 20% of their clients are Aboriginal, and they still have the elders working as cultural consultants with the senior management. Organisations can change. Organisations with the right will and motivation and commitment, you can get these kind of results. We've always said that we wanted organisations to have elders on working with their senior executive. This year, the Mental Health Commission now has elders working with their senior executives, like the Commissioner and others. So that will bring enormous change to that whole organisation. And I'd like to see that replicated across many organisations. But we've got 10 organisations who have signed up to this project. Now, 10's a sizable number, and if we can get those changes across those 10 organisations, as I described, that change in that one organisation, that's huge. You know, that to me would constitute something of a tipping point to how services can do what they do. So something's changed, and I would like to think that it's the work that's been done by the elders in this space in the way they've done it. We now have 24 elders working with us. I mean, that's a sizable number of elders. They're working across 10 organisations. They're making a difference. There will always be hurdles, but this is such an important area to work in, you know, I believe. It goes to the question of human rights. It goes to the question of how are we as to be true citizens of this country. It's such an important area. And I think health is the right of everyone. You know, good health should be the right of everyone. It shouldn't be a privilege of a few. You know, everyone should have good health, and everyone should have the means to do that. So I think there's still a lot of work here to be done, and we need more Aboriginal people in this space. I'm very hopeful for the future, actually. I think in terms of Aboriginal people coming into this space to work, and it's really good. It's something that I'm hopeful of.